Hello there, welcome back to my channel, it's James here, I hope you're doing okay. So, a couple of videos ago I made a video about my moss wall, just the update on how it was growing. It was doing super well. That's one of 3 that I currently have, and today I was like, I want to make another one. I've been planning on making a video about this for a little while, but my plan was to make kind of a new improved version, but there's so many questions about the moss wall that I already made that I just wanted to make another one. I have a couple more of these shelves, which is what I used for the previous moss walls. This is my last 2, so I'm just going to use those, make a moss wall exactly the same way as I made the other ones. But yeah, I really like the aesthetic. I like how it turned out, particularly it's been about 4.5, 5 months since I made the first one, and it's just really filled out. It's obviously not a long-term option, partially because these shelf things, sorry, there's some wire because I was using it to just clean them off. They're made of metal and they do rust, so long term you're going to get some kind of rusting of these. They're not going to be amazing, but as a kind of fun little project, it's fine. And my intention with these, sorry, it's so warm today. If I'm looking a little bit bedraggled, that's why. Yeah, really, suddenly very warm. So yeah, they're made of metal, they will rust, but my intention is not to keep these plants in here forever. You know, that this is... I'm very aware that things are going to outgrow this moss wall very fast, so in essence it's kind of just a propagation wall for me. So I'm going to have stuff growing up, hopefully get some really good size on them if the other moss walls are anything to go by, and then from there I will just chop them, propagate, and just keep it going as long as possible. Like I said, I didn't really buy anything specific for this. I had moss already, I had those shelves already, and I'm just using these little ties to kind of hold everything together. I'll show you what I do with them. Yeah, they're just like wire ties that I got with some canes that I've been using for my plants, but I haven't used any of them really. So rather than throwing them out, I'm just going to use them for this. With the previous ones, I think I spoke about this before, on my big one I used string, so just like cotton or natural fiber or something string, and that has not lasted well in the grow tent, unsurprisingly. So I would recommend, if you're going to do this, using something a little bit more durable. Wire or plastic zip ties or something like that, whatever you have around. So I'm going to show you some of the plants that I'm putting in the wall. I'm just going to kind of put 2 larger plants on either side, so I'll show you those, and then I'm going to fill in the spaces with either plants that will climb a little bit less, a couple that are gonna hang, and a couple of kind of smaller leaf things. So we'll start with the 2 anthurium that I'm going to put in. Both of these are seedlings. One I grew from seed, this one I got as a seedling. This is an Anthurium warocqueanum. I'm going to put toward the base of the wall like I did with my previous one. It seemed to really like it, and it can kind of hang down but also climb a bit because they are climbers too. So a small warocqueanum. The second anthurium is a really gorgeous one. This is an anthurium that I grew from seed, which is a hybrid between crystallinum magnificum and forgetii in some combination. I'm not exactly sure which. I think crystallinum is the primary parent and magnificum forgetii. No, I think magnificum is the primary parent and crystallinum forgetii is the cross that it was crossed with. But it's really lovely. It's got some dark leaves. All of the seedlings that I grew from this batch are kind of significantly different. So yeah, that's great. I'm excited about that. So those are the 2 anthurium. Then I've got some little bits and pieces here. I've got a cute magravia. I'm not sure how this is going to do on the wall, so I only took a segment of the plant, but it should be okay because it's still in the grow tent. Although it probably will hate being out of the tent just this short time. I've got a Rhaphidophora cryptantha, which I took off the top of my other moss wall because it had kind of overshot and was growing up the side of the grow tent, so I'll try and get that attached somehow. I've got a small Rhaphidophora foraminifera, which are lovely when they mature. I'm not expecting it to get massive, but you never know. Yeah, pretty fast growing as well. Then I have a Dischidia. This is, I think it's called Dischidia imbricata as well. I'm not actually sure, I got this in a trade recently, but I had this attached to another one of my moss walls and it just wasn't rooting into it, so I'm going to try and get it a little bit more kind of settled so that it gets good moisture. Then I've got some potted stuff. So I have a small Philodendron Belmax Fantasy that I'm going to add. That grew super well on my other moss wall, although I had it in too bright light, so I had to cut it back. But then I have this Polyneura Silver. Ooh, hello. That's fun. So it's a Polyneura with very splashy leaves. I'm going to put this toward the top of the wall because they kind of have a tumbling habit, or have it falling down a little bit. I have this little Philodendron Hederaceum oxycardium variegated. which is nice. It's quite slow. It's got a little growth point, so there is a leaf coming through, but I will put that because I want it to grow up. I want to get bigger leaves on it. And then the two large plants that I'm going to put to either side, I did this with my other one with a melanochrysum and a gigas, and I really like the look of it. I'm going to put this philodendron bicolor. So this little leaf is coming through. I imagine at some point this larger leaf is going to come off because it was one of the cuttings that I made that struggled the most. I will put this on the wall, and then on the other side I'm going to put this philodendron patricii. And hopefully that will do amazingly as well. Would love to get some like cascading leaves and then a sort of intense leaf moment in the center. So those are the leaves the plants I'm gonna use. It will probably be a little bit awkward getting some of them in place, but we're just gonna go with it. So here are my little things, my little tray, what are they called? Shelves. Hello, you very likely won't be able to see everything that I'm doing, but I'm going to do my best to kind of show you as I go. So these shelves are quite old at this point. They were the first little indoor greenhouse that I got, so there's some wear and tear. There's a little bit of like rusting happening, like I said, but it'll be fine. So far, nothing has responded negatively to them on the other moss walls. As soon as that starts happening, I will know to kind of move stuff apart. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I kind of use this as a tray. I'm going to fill it with a thick layer of moss. I'll show you as I go. I have this live moss here. So what I've been using recently is live sphagnum moss, partially because it looks beautiful. It's nice and green, but also because I can kind of keep it growing. So I have a big Tupperware, which is just off screen here and off camera. And I have all of this live moss in it. There's a small amount of growth. I've definitely noticed it growing. I've kind of topped this up as I go, but maybe I'm getting a small amount of my own sphagnum growing, who knows. It's not 100% pure. There's some of this, I can't remember what this moss is called. I did find out. But yeah, there's some of this, but it's a small enough percentage that I don't think it's a real problem. If there are any big clumps of it, I'll take it out. There's another little clump. So I'm going to take this sphagnum. I'm just going to make a nice thick layer. I'm excited to have live sphagnum on this one because the other ones that I did, it was dried sphagnum, so I had to kind of rehydrate it, etc. But it was a chance to add fertilizer, which I'm not doing from the start here, so we'll see how things start differently. So this is going in just with the amount of moisture that it had sort of when I got it, and it's held onto that in the Tupperware storage container, whatever you want to call it. I just want to evenly distribute it, make sure there aren't any huge clumps. The thicker, the better. The one moss wall that I made when I was kind of running out of moss, which has quite a bit less. Ooh, hello, moss on the floor. Struggles just a little bit more. It struggles a fair bit because it dries out just so quickly, so I've had to sort of put it in a spot where it doesn't get so much exposure to the fan. But overall, it's my least happy one. So I'm going to make sure this one, because I have plenty of moss at the moment, is really, really nice and thick. And yeah, some earth and things. Obviously, this is sphagnum from a certified harvester in Wales, I think. I've been finding out more about the sustainability of sphagnum. There's still a lot that I need to find out. I know that it can be harvested sustainably, but I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure about general practices, so that's something I want to research a lot, because I made a video on sphagnum ages ago, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I would change. And it's always the case. It's one of the most viewed videos, and I'm not like 100% happy with the information that I put in there. So at some point I will make another one, and hopefully with some updated information. If you're using dried sphagnum or any other kind of medium that you want, but if you're using dried sphagnum, I found that for something the size of what I have here, which is probably about 60 centimeters tall, maybe like 40-ish across, I'm not sure, I'm really bad at estimating stuff like that, but I was using like a pack and a half of the sphagnum that I had. I can't remember the exact weight, but it was like, it's a fair bit of moss. So don't be afraid if it seems like a lot. I will show you everything that I've put down here in just a second. Ooh, I forgot that I had a little Begonia amphioxus in the moss thing. I just kind of squished it, but I'll put it back there. Yeah, I think we're almost good. I really want to make sure that when I close the two halves together, everything's really solidly held in place by the pressure, by the kind of squeeze, so nothing's leaking out. Hopefully, if I'm able to keep this moist enough, the moss will continue to grow. I think it will inside the grow tent. In the pots and stuff, it keeps growing. So, and if you have more information, if you have done research on sustainable sphagnum harvesting, obviously we know that peat is terrible. That's been a known thing for a long time. Sphagnum peat, which is kind of the broken down, decayed, decomposed version of sphagnum. That's when it's been compressed over years and years and years and years and years into this kind of really carbon rich, dense substrate. That's what we don't want to be pulling out. I think that sphagnum can be sustainably harvested, but obviously I would like to be corrected if that's wrong. And if I am wrong, then I definitely need to look into growing something else in something else, because it's such a go-to substrate for me. Like, I'd say the things that I most commonly use for cuttings, sphagnum is definitely top of everything. And then I use pon and perlite and water, but like sphagnum is absolutely a go-to. And there's been a lot of like chat about peat in the houseplant community at the moment, particularly in like the aroid world. If you're in the carnivorous plant community, I think it's very tricky to avoid peat. But in the aroid world, most of the aroid mixes that people recommend using, like I would never use an aroid mix that has peat in it just because it holds so much water, you know? I'd want to use something that's much, much more, it's just not necessary. So if you are currently using, if you're an aroid person and you're currently using an aroid mix that includes peat, I would try and go somewhere else because you don't need it. So this is looking pretty good, I think. Like, I want the edges to just come together. So this is what I have. It's kind of a little moss sandwich inside this. Really, really glamorous. So I'm just kind of patting that down, checking out where there are gaps. So I need a little bit more around the edges just to make sure it's really full. The getting the plants in, I will do after this is done. So it's a little bit tricky with the plants with slightly larger root systems. So I'm anticipating the Patriciae being a little bit of a challenge. But what I did previously is I literally just hollowed out a little bit, pulling moss out of the little squares, stuffed the roots in, and then kind of sealed it back up, and things absolutely loved it. Are we almost there? I think. So just one more little tuft of sphagnum, and that'll do. Okay. Again, close test. Yes, okay, so that is my little sphagnum pad. Where did I put these? So what I'm gonna do with these, I haven't actually tried this, so we'll see if it works. If it doesn't work, I'm gonna have to stop the video and go and get something else for this. But the idea at the moment, these are kind of little wired centered things that you use to tie plants to canes. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go along the edge of this and I'm literally just gonna tie them on. And then if there's like huge amounts of hanging stuff, I'll trim them off at the end. But yeah, I'm just gonna tie them in place. And yeah, that seems to be nice and easy. So this is gonna be boring, so I'll just kind of do this and then come back to you in a mo. Okay, so that is the first step done. So I can kind of show you this bit. What I've done is I've just tied these around. There's lots of excess, which I'll cut off and reuse because you only need a tiny bit to attach plants. But I've done that on both sides and I've done it on the bottom. The top I've left open because it's the top, it's not going to fall out that way. There will be some like loss of moss as you move things around and things kind of settle into place, but it should be relatively minimal so long as you make it tight enough. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put the larger plants in place first and then I'll kind of add smaller ones as we go, and I'll kind of show you periodically because I know the angle's not super good, but I don't have a fancy setup or anything. So I'm going to start with this Patriciae. Let's check out the roots, see how much of a gap we have to make. This is currently just potted up in sphagnum and pon, kind of a random little mix I make. So I'm going to strip off as much of this sphagnum as I can. It only went in here really recently, so I will reuse this moss and the plant is healthy. The only time I don't reuse moss is if the plant is sick or has pests, you know. Otherwise I absolutely just recycle it, because why would you not? So we have this Patricii. I think I'm going to bring it down onto this side, so kind of lower for me left hand side. And what I'm going to do, I think you can see here, is I just pull out a bunch of the moss, make a little hollow in there, and then I have it ready to put back in. Yep. And then I will get the roots into the top hole and kind of use the lower hole to drag everything down into place. The great thing about these walls is because you can keep them so wet and they dry out so well, like the wet dry cycle is so, I always talk about that, but it's so consistent and fast, you can basically root stuff in here. So even if I were, like, I'm going to put some unrooted stuff on here and it will be completely fine, which is nice. So now I have all of this moss, again there's some of this stringy stuff, and I'm just going to kind of stick it in and lock everything in place. Make sure everything's nice and supported. If anything seemed like it was going to fall out, I just use another one of those wire things or a piece of string or something just to tie it in place. But hopefully, if I've slotted everything in properly, that should already be relatively stable. So that's our first plant, Philodendron Patricii, and there's some pond falling out of it, but yeah. Okay, plant number one, let's go straight into the bicolor. I think the roots on this one are kind of small as well. It's in straight sphagnum, maybe? Ooh, I think they've been doing stuff, which is nice. Last time I took this out, it was not doing too hot. So this is nice. Bicolor is just amazing, but it's a little bit awkward to give support unless you have like a massive moss pole. I found it kind of just snakes around. So I'm interested to see what it will do on here. Yeah, it's got some decent roots with like a flat surface to climb against. What happened on the other one, is that the larger plants that I put on the side, not necessarily the one I showed you, but on the other one I have on one side a Philodendron Hederaceum var Hederaceum or Micans, and the other I have the Brantianum, and they just grew right up the sides, kind of like little pillars, using like a little section as a moss pole, which is quite nice. I would like these to stay a little bit more in the front so that I don't know, so that you can get more of the big leaf, long pendant leaf vibe. Let's put this a little bit lower actually, that's quite high to start, because obviously it's not going to grow down, so we want to start as low as possible so that it has as much space to grow as possible. Yeah, rocket science. Space doesn't have to be super massive. I've just got a couple of roots like this. What happened with the other ones, I have one with a massive Florida Beauty now that's growing on it, and the roots are just like dripping down against the wall, so they've kind of filled up most of the moss, because obviously there's not a huge amount of space for roots, which is why it's not a long-term solution. But it's making it work. It's like dripping down the back all the way to the base of the grow tent and really filling it up. So I am going to use one of the ties for this one. I'm going to pack this in with moss as best I can, so get everything really nice and supported. Just make sure I don't snap any growth points or anything, that would be annoying. And then because of this long leaf, which like I said, I think will probably come off, I'm going to use a little tie just to make sure it doesn't, like, if it gets caught on something, it doesn't just get wrenched out, which would be annoying. And this is very messy, by the way. Like, if you're doing this, I'm doing this over a carpet and I haven't, but put down like a towel or something, you know? So yeah, what I'm going to do with one of these, I'm just going to kind of thread it across. So I've got one of these, I'll just thread it across and wrap around two of the bars to either side, just to lock it in place. There and there. And this, I don't know, I'm just kind of threading it all over the place so that it doesn't fall out. Okay, second one, where are the pots? So over on the other side now, we have, oh, look at all that moss falling. We have a little Philodendron bicolor. So this is kind of the base. That clattering is just the pond from the Patricii falling out. Okay, so next one we're going to do is Warocqueanum, this little Queenanthurium, which I'm going to get, again, put kind of center bottom-ish. And then I'll put the other Anthurium a little bit higher on the other side. And then the other climbing things I'm going to kind of arrange across this upper center part here. I mean, you can't see, but yeah. So this is a Warraquianum that I got pretty recently at the same time as I got my Oblique Amazonas, if you saw that. It's doing okay. There's definitely some acclimation stuff happening, like it's lost a couple of roots. It was, it's actually not a seedling, I thought it was. This is a cutting, you can see the chunk that it came from, but still, that's great. It doesn't need that, but I'll put it in anyway, just in case it's pulling any kind of anything from there. So let's have it a little bit more toward the bicolor side. Second Anthurium. This is the Magnificum Crystallinum Forgetii. I haven't, oh, it's got some really nice roots. I haven't seen, like, I don't know what these are going to look like mature, but this is one of my favorite. They're all quite dark like this and pretty, so hopefully we get some nice mature leaves. And this moss wall also is going to be going in a slightly darker spot than the other ones. So the other ones that I have in this tent are in actually pretty bright light. So I've had, that's why the Belmax Fantasy bleached. There's some bleaching on like the Melanochrysum and on a couple of the Anthuriums. So I'm thinking this will be like a much darker, lusher kind of look, hopefully. That said, the super bright light has made it grow really, really fast. So these are pretty big roots. So I'm going to have to make a little bit more space for this one. But I'm going to put it kind of directly across on the other side from the Warraquianum. I'm not super worried about overplanting stuff or planting things a little bit too close together, because if things start to get crowded, you can literally just cut them off. Like, it's not like they're just going to die suddenly. They will let you know if they are running out of space. And the great thing about aroids is they are pretty easy to prop. Oh, I did rip off a couple of roots, that's a shame. It'll make up for it quickly. Okay, so quick check-in. We have, at this point, prepare for the moss fall. We have the Patricii, the bicolor, we have that little Warraquianum, and we have the Magnificum Forgetii. Okay, so we're going to carry on. I'm going to put some of these climbers, these shinglers on, this Magravia. I really don't know how it will do. So I'm not going to give it like a priority spot or anything, just in case it disintegrates, because last time I tried to move a Magravia out of the grow box, it just died so fast. So I'm going to get as much of the stem as I can into the moss, and I will water everything. Even though this moss is pretty moist already, I will give everything a little spray down when I hang it up, just so that things are kind of locked in place. Where are my scissors? I don't have any scissors. However, I have a knife. So I'm going to just use a little bit of this to lock the top of the Magravia in place and really press it tight into the moss so that it can get the aerial roots drinking. This is very fun, very therapeutic. Like, this is why I was doing it over lockdown. It was just something that I could sit on the floor with like a podcast on and just stick stuff in the wall, and it was really, really nice. So, and I wasn't expecting it to work particularly. Like, I kind of thought it was just something to try, and it worked out super well, so I'm happy. Next thing I'm going to put on is this Cryptantha. It's a little bit warped, so I'm going to have to kind of shove it into place. But I want it to go starting just above this Magnificum Forgetii, Crystallinum, whatever it is. And same thing, I'm just going to kind of press it in and use a little bit of one of those ties. So obviously these are ugly, like particularly the colour. If you got some like neutralish ones, you could leave them on, but as soon as these things are rooted and like holding themselves in place, I will remove them. Oops. Ne vous inquiétez pas. Okay, so we have the Magravia and the Cryptantha in place. We're now going to go for this Rhaphidophora foraminifera. I can't decide what I want to put. I think I'm going to do the Belmux Fantasy first, actually. And I'm going to put it right in the center. So like between those two Anthurium at the bottom, so it has the full length of the wall to climb up. The roots on these are really, really tiny. I don't know why. Like, I've been growing this cutting for a while, and it just doesn't seem to produce very many roots, which is fine. They don't suffer. They don't struggle particularly. They're just reluctant to root. Also, something I've noticed, which I'm kind of following here, but because I always water them from the top, so I have like a pressure spray thing, and I kind of just spray through front and back if I'm not soaking it. But as soon as you hang it up, all of the water like settles at the base, so the upper part of the moss wall gets really airy really fast, but the lower part stays quite saturated for a little while. So I'm trying here to leave like 2 little squares at the bottom. Obviously, the water is spreading throughout, but I just don't, it's not like anything's going to sit in water because everything is so open. This is just moss, but I'm just being a little bit aware just in case there's, just to avoid any risk of rot or anything like that. But like I said, I haven't had any issues with anything rotting at all on these. Like, the chances of it are just so low, particularly if you have it in an environment which is like well ventilated. If there's a fan close to it or something, it's very unlikely that will happen. So Belmux Fantasy is in place, ready to take over. This is one of those plants that it's like, why does everyone say they're so slow? They're such fast growers in terms of foliage. Okay, so that's not where I wanted it. I don't know why I put it there, but it'll do. That's fine. Okay, so that's nice. That will go straight up the center. I'm going to give the variegated Hederaceum. Anyway, this variegated heartleaf philodendron, that's an easier name, which is putting out some roots at last. It's quite slow, I guess because it's so highly variegated. It's such a pretty leaf. But I'll put that a little bit above and across from the Belmux Fantasy because, again, I think once it gets settled, it will be quite fast, and I want it to have a lot of growing space. So when I'm done with this, it won't look like very much. There'll be a lot of empty space, which is my intention. I'm planting things close at the bottom, but as they grow, they will like kind of, everything will slot together and they'll find their little space, and hopefully it will look really lush and lovely. But definitely, to begin with, it may look a little bit sparse. Just want to make sure the growth point is pointing forward. So I put a cream splash philodendron on one of the other walls, and I just kind of stuck the node in because it was unrooted cutting. But the growth point must have been pointing backwards because it's growing back toward the wall, and there's like this white, lightless plant that's growing up the back of the wall. So yeah, just want to make sure if they are cuttings that the growing point is facing outward. Okay, we have literally 3 more plants here. So I'm going to put this Dischidia just above the Margravia. I think I might take it off this mount, as lovely as it is, just so I can, again, really press it in and there's no barrier to the watering. Because I think part of the issue with it on the other wall is because I left it on this little mount and then I had it pressed against the moss, but the water just wasn't soaking all the way through. So yeah, right, here we are. I want to leave space for the bicolour, so I'm going to put it a little bit over here. I don't mind if parts of the plant get like covered, you know, so long as they have enough leaves not covered, I think it'll be fine. I'm running out of these little things. I thought I'd never get through them. This is very good. Great. Okay, Dischidia in place. And we have 2 more plants. So the Polyneura, like I said, this silver one I'm going to put up at the top. Just pots everywhere. So how are we doing? I won't get all the pon off here, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to give those roots a little rinse off before I put it in the wall. So right now, quickly, I'll just put this Raffi in place, and this one will go, we're kind of running out of climbing space here. So I'm going to put it above the Cryptanther and just beside the, sort of across from the Belmax Fantasy, and it should be fine. Because the Cryptanther, from experience with the other ones, it kind of just snakes its way through everything. It doesn't seem to want to climb straight up. So I'm not too bothered about giving it a clear path, just so long as it has space to grow. But I'm imagining this foraminifera will climb pretty directly upward. Okay, I'm just going to run and clean out those Polyneura roots. I'll be back in a sec. So I just went to clean off the roots, even though I said I wasn't going to, because I've had issues with root mealybugs. I thought there might be, but I think it was just a bit of perlite stuck in there. But you can never be too careful with these things, so that's what I did. I'm going to put this right up high, because everyone I've seen, I've never seen a climbing Polyneura. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, they kind of tumble. And I put a Dischidia rustifolia variegated on my other moss wool, the larger one, and I love the way it kind of is tumbling down the front, so that's sort of what I want here. So I'm going to pop this in here, and hopefully it will kind of cascade down over and in between plants, and the silver leaves are just really, really gorgeous. Okay, that is it. This is super easy. I'm not going to do this on camera, but I'm just going to trim the edges off, so I'll show you in a sec the ties. But this is basically what we have. Give it a little shake. So that's the back, obviously. And this is what we're looking at to begin with. So, starting from the bottom, you know what's what, probably. We have the Patricii on this side. Moving across, we've got the Anthurium Magnificum Crystallinum Forgetii. Then you have the Belmax Fantasy in the center. Across from that, the Anthurium Warocqueanum, the Queen Anthurium. And then the bicolor, and then going back that way we have the Margravia. We've got the variegated heartleaf, the what's it called? Rhaphidophora cryptantha, and then above that there is the Rhaphidophora foraminifera, and then the Dischidia, and up there is the Hoya Polyneura silva. So this is what it looks like. Like I said, it's going to look very, very sparse for a while. There is going to be some moss fall. But to me that looks great. Everything is really nice and stable. Nothing's going to tip out of that or fall. So I think we've done a pretty good job there. I will update you on this. Hopefully if it's anything like the other ones, it will go really, really quick, and there'll be some updates pretty fast. Yeah, within 4 months, the other one went from this, it looked even less sort of well established than this, to like a fully covering this basically. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you want to see updates on this, obviously subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon if you want to get notifications, like the video if you enjoyed it, and if you want to see updates on this and all of my other plants, you can check out my Instagram at slugplants. I try and post there pretty regularly. And yeah, let me know down below if you want to try this. Obviously, this is not like a perfect thing. I haven't done anything very clever here. There's no like design. This is just bits that I had lying around that I've turned into a moss wall, and it's worked really, really well through time, so I wanted to share it. Obviously you might have to adapt it for your space. This works really well for me because I have grow tents. If you have a greenhouse, grow tents, IKEA cabinets, this probably will work really well for you. If you don't, if you are trying to grow something out in your normal home space, you're going to have to make some adaptations. Obviously you're going to want to have something on the back of it so that it doesn't leach water out against the wall. Yeah, but I trust you, I believe in you to make the alterations that you need. Yeah, that is it. One last little look at it, and then it will go in the grow tent. I'll give it a little water, like I said, just to kind of lock everything in place. But that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day, and goodbye. See you next time.